Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to yet another live with Women to Women. And today we are talking about, or we are talking to an extremely inspiring young mind and writer, in fact. We are speaking to the writer of Journey to Hadaya, Kainat Azhar. And mashallah, not only is she an inspiration in terms of what she is doing as her chosen career path, but also the new mindset that she brings to not only, or rather, the point of view that she brings to not only the genre that she's writing about, but also the conversation as a whole. And what do I mean by that? So, basically, I remember the first time I read a romance novel. I read it under the covers after my mom fell asleep because astaghfirullah, she find me reading a book about love. And unfortunately, even in 2024, this is a conversation that is taboo in many Pakistani and or Muslim households. And so here we meet Kainat, who actually writes in a new genre, and I think something that's really devised and created by writers such as yourself, which I like to call halal romance. So, with that said, I would like to begin with, just Kainat, please introduce yourself.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So my name is Kainat, as Miss Beanish mentioned. I'm 22. I just graduated from Rutgers in May, this past May, and right now I'm just working on my next book. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Mashallah. And do tell us, Kainat, exactly. Well, gave a brief introduction about what it is why we are interviewing you. That you wrote a book called Journey to Hidayah, mashallah. And so basically, it's a book. Well, why don't you tell me what is the story about exactly?
Yeah, sure. So the story is about a Pakistani female Muslim CEO. And she's very different from, I think, the conventional female characters that we see in contemporary fiction, especially in the brown community. She's brazen and bold and arrogant and has the sort of characteristics that you would usually see, I guess, in a man in fiction. And so one of the things I love about like in my writing is to kind of flip the script and surprise people. So I was like, let me take the kind of cookie cutter billionaire CEO trope and make her female and Pakistani and Muslim. So she's just this woman who's on her journey towards reconnecting with her faith. She's been ostracized from the faith-based community. She's had many bad experiences with her faith, has a lot of for lack of a better term, religious trauma. But the story is about her kind of working towards developing a true connection with her faith and establishing a connection with God. And because I love romance, and I read romance, and that's just my favorite genre, she's someone who, she meets someone who kind of changes her perceptions on what being Muslim means and what a true connection with faith entails. And so that kind of sets her, he's kind of a catalyst for her getting back on this journey with her faith and reconnecting with God. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Yeah.
Excellent. So you touched upon a lot of topics that I definitely want to come back to. But before we do that, I want to ask you. So many of you who know me on a personal basis, and some of you who know me as my alter ego, which I will not go into right now, know that I love writing, and I know what writing specifically means to me. What does writing mean to you, Kainat, as someone who is obviously pursuing this in a much more passionate way than I have? What does writing mean to you?
So this might be really cliche to say, but honestly, I think writing is like literally a lifeline to me. And again, cliche, but I really don't know who I would be without it. I think I've been writing ever since I was able to like understand words and pick up a pencil. I would be writing in the margins of notebooks, behind homework assignments, rushing up to my teachers every day with some new story. So writing has like always been a part of my life, and I think I would say like writing is like my humsafar. It's something that it's always been my companion. I cannot imagine my life or who I would be without it. So it's definitely a lifeline for me.
Excellent. So, exactly. I second every, expression and feeling that you just emoted here. So yeah, writing is a lifeline to you. And, I can out actually relate to that too. Yeah, sometimes like I'll be working on something relative to my corporate career, and I kid you not, like I'll be stressing out, and then I'll just take out my notepad and just jot a few words down, and, like 15, 20 minutes of just focusing on that. And then, okay, back to my real life. So I totally understand that, how you would write down, jot down things on the back of your journal. And then, but you took it a step further, mashallah. So you told us that you've been writing since you first, picked up a pencil. How did you realize that this was a career path that you wanted to pursue? Again, because the first time I remember saying this to my mother. I'm sorry, this is like me kind of touching, relating to you, and me talking about that. But the first time I told my mom I wanted to be a writer, she told me, "Astaghfirullah, it's not it's not a career for a Pakistani Muslim bachi." And and then I just kind of put that on the back end. But how did you realize that you wanted to pursue this, professionally, number one, and then actually do it?
Yeah, so I think like I have to say this first of all, the entire credit for this like definitely goes to my family for being so supportive, my parents especially, for never pressurizing me. I know the common, I guess, Desi narrative is you have to be a computer science person or you have to like go into engineering or you got to be a doctor. And while those are obviously there's merit in all of those occupations, and for people who are able to pursue them, that's amazing, right? But my parents have never kind of I've never been told what to pursue, what to study. It's always been do what you love, focus on your education, put your heart into it, right? So I had that liberty, I think, to pursue something that I loved without any of those, I guess, hindrances. So I've always loved writing. I feel like I never envisioned it as something I'd be able to do, I guess, full time. Even like as a little girl, I was like, yeah, I'd love to be a published author someday. And alhamdulillah, I'm at that point right now. But I think my turning point was coming across. So, as an English and psychology major, I came across a lot of classes in which I read a lot of literature and stuff. So, came across a quote by Toni Morrison, in which she said, "If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it." And I think that something in me just like something flipped when I read that quote, and I was like, wow, like this is zindagi ka maqsad, like I found my purpose. And I went ahead and hopefully tried to write the type of book that I wanted to see. And I think that's when I realized that, yeah, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And, even if I do plan on um, applying to other jobs and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, even if I'm doing the 9 to 5, I will always come home and do the 5 to 9 that I like love and care about, which is writing for me.
Awesome. So, I love that, how you term that, like I will always be doing the 9 to 5, but I'll be still pursuing the 5 to 9 that that you're passionate about. So in terms of, obviously you were writing as a child, and you decided you want to pursue this as a career path. You had, mashallah, support from your family, but then there's a process. How did you actually go about publishing that book? And I mean, I think right there and then one, it gets like, should I really do this? Because you get a lot of headway in terms of like people that you approach. And the first time that, for example, I started writing Urdu poetry, I actually sent it to one of a shire that I was following, and I asked him, "Hey, how is this? Can you tell me?" And he was like, "Kabhi na likhna." And then that really like just pushed me to write more. I was like, how dare he, you know? So then I like, so then these kinds of roadblocks, like not only critical people that tell you why are you doing this, but actual publishing companies that are not willing to listen to voices that, and more often than not, they're not willing to listen to people that don't have connections and have not been heard before. So how did you overcome those obstacles?
So I think in terms of like publishing, I would always, I guess, try to be involved in the writing sphere somehow. I did like an internship for an editorial internship in high school. I was part of like the Teen Writers Guild. Anything that involved writing, I would try to be a part of it. And I think I was able to kind of get some footing when in high school I co-published anthologies with the Teen Writers Guild. And later decided that I definitely do still want to publish a work of my own. And so it's funny actually, during lockdown is when I was able to, when COVID hit and like lockdown started in March. In April, I started writing my debut novel. And I had been like, I had the story brewing in my mind for a while, but I think I actually got the time and the energy to sit down and write it once like the world sort of was put on pause. So I guess after that, I did research like there's different ways of publishing, self slash indie publishing, traditional publishing. And so after I had written my novel, I did a lot of research on that. And I think, as you mentioned, that it's very hard, it's very easy, I think, to be heartbroken by hearing certain things in the industry, especially when you're just starting out. So at that point in my life, I think that indie publishing was the best option for me, self-publishing, just to kind of get a better grasp of the publishing industry without, I guess, throwing myself into the sharks by going straight to traditional publishing, right?
Excellent. So
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned that because there are other ways, especially now in 2024, there are other ways to publish. I mean, like many people utilize social media per se. I know you like you were doing that you are doing that actually. And every time I read your reels on Instagram and I'm like, oh my God, I want to read more of this story. And I sometimes like I want to be like, can not send me another page. like like I totally understand that like you could for all of those out there that are inspiring to be writing professionally, definitely utilize the resources that you have at you're not stuck in the time where you have to reach out to the publish like actually I don't even know any publishing company's name, to be honest with you. Like this is how obsolete, no offense, would you please fire na kar dena, like publishing companies have become. So yeah, I agree, you should definitely think outside of the box. And you talked about writing during COVID. How did you stay motivated? I mean, honestly, with this at our fingertips constantly, like how does one stay motivated to write? Which is many times, you encounter roadblocks, and like there'll be a sentence in your mind, and say your brother or your sister comes into the room and they're like, hey, blah blah blah, and then you're like, dang it, I just lost the scene that I was contemplating. So how do you stay motivated? How do you prioritize writing your 5 to 9 job, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think definitely always remembering why I'm writing, always coming back to that. And for me, that's I write these stories because I want people like me, who look like me, who talk like me, who feel like me, to be able to go to a bookstore and pick up a book where they can see themselves in it, right? So always remembering that I want that for our community. And also just in terms of, I guess, staying motivated, hearing from my readers, honestly. When I first started with this novel specifically, with Journey to Hidayah, I had started writing it on Wattpad. And so the way that it works is like you can publish as you go, like a chapter at a time. And so people can comment on like each paragraph on Wattpad. So honestly, building that community on there, when I first started writing, people started reading, people started getting interested, comments started coming in, I started getting feedback. So I think the feedback from readers really, really kept me motivated to specifically, especially for that book. When someone would like be like, your work changed my life, or like I feel heard, or like someone once told me like they started praying again, and like I do not think I'm deserving of anything like that, but it really just shook me to my core. And I think that's what motivates me to keep writing and hopefully keep writing things that touch people's hearts.
Mashallah. I especially like to hear something like that you inspired me to pray again. Like that must have, I, it must have been so. I have no words actually. It must have been so just motivating to continue on doing what you were doing, right?
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah, she's making a difference in other people's lives as well, just through her writing. So coming back to the how you wanted to see like a character like you in a book, right? So in regards to that, and in regards to how I kind of preempted the conversation in terms of writing romance as a genre and like the taboo that surrounds it in the Pakistani Muslim norm, you said that your parents supported you. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so I think before starting this, it's important to kind of operationally define halal romance as I see it. So what I would define it as like writing romance and love as something that adheres to my religious and spiritual values while still being authentic to the Muslim human experience, right? And so I actually began writing halal romance because I read a lot, right? And I was tired of seeing, for lack of a better word, explicit stuff in Western fiction. And I kind of wanted a space and a world that showcased what it's really like for Muslims. And so my like faith, my religious values, my upbringing, that's something I'm not willing to compromise on ever. But I think sometimes it's definitely tricky to try to showcase a real, authentic experience of what being a Muslim, being in love is like without miscommunicating, or as some may see it, transgressing religious or moral values, right? But faith is a big part of my life. And again, I don't intend to compromise it in my work. I just want to showcase the beauty of being engrossed in faith and being engrossed and having an attachment to your faith while, just being a regular human being who loves and cries and laughs and has all the emotions that everyone else has. And I think that just as the Western world has this idea that religion is oppressive and backwards, I think oftentimes in a lot of faith-based communities as well, there's this idea that faith is backwards or outdated, isn't relevant. um, but I strongly disagree with that. I think that incorporating faith, the beauties of faith, the struggles of faith, the very raw and real and human experiences of faith, makes up what life is. And I guess that's what I mean when I say that I write halal fiction, halal romance. Again, trying my best to portray this authentic version of the Muslim experience, and having faith be a large part of that. I guess romance in the modern sense of the word may be limited to just like conventional dating, maybe hookup culture. But what I try to do with halal romance is to draw examples maybe from our tradition's history. The Prophet Muhammad's mercy, his gentleness, Khadija radiallahu anha's like courage, bravery. So portray the beauty of being Muslim and in love while, staying connected to your faith. And I think that's what has never caused, I guess, rifts in my writing, and like my parents, my family being supportive of it, because we have that sort of understanding of it.
Okay, excellent. So basically, the butterflies without the without the flies. It really so yeah, I agree 101%, and I will reluctantly admit that that was why I would hide my book under the covers when my mother would come in, because she would not believe me if I said no, no, I skipped over the that part, but but I was just there for the floaty stuff, you know. Let's
Right.
be honest, right? But then this really brings up, it opens up another door to, I think, another conversation, in the sense of like, we are now, subhanallah, at a point in our I think community, and as our kind of our Muslim identity as a whole, that where we can actually discuss these things and have these conversations with our parents, right? Like in terms of like ideals, in terms of a potential mate and somebody we would marry and somebody we would be romantically involved with and actually be interested in. Like, is this a conversation, as being a 22-year-old, is this a conversation that you commonly have with your parents, and comfortably so, I should say?
In terms of like my own like um yeah, I mean I don't think, to be honest, it's not really, I guess right now it's not a priority, but I know that if I were to, have that as a priority, want to pursue like marriage in the next couple of years, definitely that's something I would be able to openly talk to my parents about, because they have created that sort of environment with me, which I'm grateful for, alhamdulillah. So definitely, yeah.
Excellent. So I that's essentially what I exactly. Normally, romance is tied with shame in our society, showcasing how halal romance exists and can exist is a very unique approach. And the funny thing is that it's not a unique approach. You spoke about Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his like hadith, and how he actually spoke about, he actually prescribed men and women to be romantic towards each other, use terms of endearment, you have nicknames for your spouse and your significant other. There's a hadith that I will not delve too much into because I'm no scholar, but he actually spoke about giving honey sweet words to your wife. Like, all that is romance, and we look at these things as something that should not exist, when actually it is a prescription for our deen. It is not
Mhm.
something that we should look down upon, in a halal sense, of course. I don't want anybody coming to me and saying like, "Tum kya bachcho ko bata rahi ho?" But like, in a halal sense. And definitely, once somebody is pursuing marriage, there's nothing wrong with following that script, so to speak.
Mhm.
So, kind of going back to your writing process, what inspires you to write? Is it true that art is inspired by life? And if so, am I going to be seeing myself in a book of yours?
Definitely. um,
मैं
I
बहुत अच्छी हूँ. I love you, कायनात.
um I think, yeah, I feel like just this may be a reiteration of what I may have mentioned already, but in terms of writing, my biggest inspiration is wanting to seeing things in contemporary fiction and mainstream media and wanting to change the narrative. Like I mentioned Toni Morrison's quote, and that kind of drove me to write my debut novel. So just having this, I guess I have a strong desire to like combat perceptions and biases and stereotypes that people may have about certain groups of people, like Muslims or South Asians. And again, just people like me to be able to walk around a bookstore or scroll online on like Amazon or like Kindle or something and see a book with people like me and feel like they're being heard.
Yeah. So I think that's a definite thing. Again, going back to what you were saying, like the fact that you're writing about this gives it and as somebody who is mashallah devout to their deen, is giving it not only allowance, but shedding the veil without it sounding too bad, like on this topic in general, that we, this is something that we can pursue, and this is something that we can talk about. So have you ever met somebody who ever inspired you, and that you actually did put in one of your stories? And you don't have to name names, but have you?
um, I think for my current work that I'm working on, yes. Have you ever heard where people are like, "Don't ever piss off a writer because you'll end up as like villain in in one of their stories," or something like that. Um, so
You heard it here again. Don't piss off a writer.
yeah, not I mean, that was more of a joke, but like,
No, no, it's actually real. Like, I think I always say, like, those with actual intellect use their words to their benefit. So I always say, like, इस तरह की, like, अगर आपको गुस्सा है किसी पे, if you're angry with somebody, if you're mad at somebody, then the best way to approach that is tell them so, but in a very complex vocabulary, to seek out the dictionary, like, what is she saying? But then at the same time, yeah, I agree. Like, it helps you calm down your emotions, and it
right,
definitely tells the other person that they are in the wrong in some way. So
right.
you actually, I'm assuming that you put them as a villain then.
um, I think, uh, without giving too much away, maybe I wouldn't say a villain. Just I think certain qualities, maybe that you learn lessons from, and I think I like to put that in my writing, so maybe others don't make the same mistakes. And
Right.
also, like, I think people also say that often writers will put a little bit of themselves in each character that they write. I think that's really true. Even just a minuscule amount, or even if it's a lot, there's always a little bit of the writer in the writing.
Exactly. So I always think that everything that we write is it's a creation. It's much like, it's almost like a child, so to speak, right? We will definitely, actually, let's address this question. Can we discuss why creating books on such topics are very important for our youth's development? What do you think? Why is it important to have such genre or such books, in the aspect of having out there for readers to read, for the development of young minds such as yourself, you know going kind of going on, yeah, I'm you losing my words right now. But why do you think such topics should exist for not only people of your age, but even the younger set?
So this is funny because my little sister and I were just she's a very avid reader too, and yesterday she actually sent me a reel, and she wrote under it that I think half of the world's problems would be solved if people read more. And I, 100% agree. I think that reading isn't just, I think people have this perception, especially of women, especially in regards to reading romance, that, oh, they're just like reading about fairy tales and fluffy clouds and sunshine and Delulu stuff. But like, it's a lot more than that. Like you learn about like you learn about strong characters, you learn about the struggles that people similar to you may have, you learn about the world, you learn about experiences maybe that you haven't had but that you may have someday, or maybe that experiences that you have in the past but were never able to learn from. There's so much you can learn from reading, whatever genre it may be. I think there's always something to learn from it. And so I think definitely, going back to that real, 100% agree that I think it's very important for anyone to be reading, because that's how you view the world, essentially.
Yeah. We already spoke about this, Miss Nusrat. So how can you connect healthy romance stories with commitment? So actually, the going back to why we're talking about this and why we're saying that such stories should be now in the norm is because it does create a form for conversation, so to speak, so that we can actually have these conversations not only with our, the younger set in our community, but also with each other, that we can actually talk about expectations versus reality, which is, I think, oftentimes ignored. As you said, that like, oftentimes romance get this bad rap, that this it's just a fairy tale romance of a prince rescuing a princess, which, by the way, I love that your genre does not do that. Okay, I always say it's actually, until you rescue yourself, no one can rescue you. Whether you're a girl or a guy, you gotta be your own hero. You have to be your biggest supporter in order to so-called rescue you from any travesty, so to speak.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely, it creates conversations, and yeah, like realizations, frankly speaking, for every individual out there, in terms of uh, like, what you like to read and what are you currently reading, who is your favorite writer, what about their writing strikes you. Like, I like to write, about a lot of stuff, but mostly, you know yeah, love versus reality versus what life.
Right.
But I read actually Dean Koontz, writes suspense horror. So he's my favorite writer. I've read everything that he's ever written in my life. You know, I have read every single thing that he's ever written. So who's your favorite writer? What are you currently reading, and how does that differ from what you write? And does it correlate?
Yeah, I think I read a lot of what I write, but I'm also very, very into fantasy, fantasy romance, even better when there's both. But I think in terms of favorite writer, I always have a hard time with this question because I admire a lot of different things about a lot of different writers. But I really love Holly Black. She's a fantasy fiction writer, and I think what I really love about her writing, one of the things is that she has a bit of an unconventional writing style. So she often writes the way one would speak, very conversational. And sometimes, her writing doesn't adhere to certain stylistic or grammatical conventions. So I feel like I always just appreciate writing that breaks the boundaries of convention, in terms of like writing style. So I do appreciate her work a lot, and I'm actually just rereading one of her books right now. It's called The Wicked King, and it's part of a trilogy. So, yeah, I mean, I love fantasy, I love romance, I also love spiritual fiction. I absolutely love Peter Gamil. That was one of the biggest inspirations for me to write my own work. And I don't really read nonfiction much, but Reclaim Your Heart as well by Yasmin Mujahid. Amazing, amazing book. And that was also a huge source of inspiration. And I definitely learned a lot from it. So, yeah, I think I'm trying to expand the kind of stuff that I read. I'm trying to get into like crime and like maybe mystery and horror, but I always come back to romance and fantasy. So,
No, I understand that. I think in terms of especially like I think it depends on your vibe at the moment as well. Um,
mhm.
as I said, like I love to read Dean Koontz, and but every time I would read his book, like I would finish it in like 2 days. I would close it. I would throw it at the other end of the room because I didn't want the monster in the book to come out and get me. So, so I totally understand how one can read different people and like be inspired. I think like how you mentioned you read Pierre Camille, like was that in Urdu?
So I can read Urdu, but not that much. So I read the English version.
Okay, excellent. So how do you like this is a little bit a topic question that we didn't discuss, but how do you compare the Urdu writers that write about romance versus the English the Western writers that write about romance? What would you say is the biggest difference? Not in terms of like the gushy and the icky stuff. Obviously, that's a difference, but beyond that, what is the difference of expectations of romance and love that they have versus the
Mm.
Eastern writers' romance and love that they have? So
So
it's a little outside of the box. I was like, just to develop a conversation.
I think maybe my answer would not be very because I've only read Peter Kamil in like the I guess as a Pakistani novel. I really do want to read more, but my reading Urdu is kind of limited to like WhatsApp posts.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if this is to answer your question specifically, but what I had noticed in Peter Kamil and the other Western fiction that I've read is that there's a lot more focus on, I guess, emotions and feelings in Pakistani literature. At least what I have come across. Again, my experience is not very vast, but a lot more about like what's going on in your heart and the range of emotions that you experience. Not that that's not explored in Western fiction, it definitely is. Just one thing I noticed specifically in regards to Peter Kamil. So, but again, my opinion may not be representative.
Well, even I think even with me, it's limited, same as you, Instagram posts and the WhatsApp posts and things like that. But yeah, I agree. In terms of Western ideology about love and Eastern ideology about. Like I think in Eastern ideology there exists that concept of ishq, right?
Yeah.
That, yeah, which we don't have a word that translates in English for that.
Mm.
We only really have one, and it's not two dimensional. It's three dimensional. Yes, love is three dimensional too, but however, ishq is ishq. In if you actually literally translate into English, it's obsession, and obsession gets a very negative. It gives
Right.
off a very negative vibe, whereas ishq is it's a almost like it's a passion, almost like an brittled passion per se, and not so much as in the physical sense as in the emotional sense, that one is so wrapped in such rapture of
Right.
one's beloved that one is in ishq with them. You know, like the other day I read this writer who wrote, who said usko mohabbat thi magar mujhe ishq tha.
Mm.
Okay. So which really, like, it really gives a definition of like the Western versus Eastern kind of definition of love, and how it is relative but a little bit different. And not to
Right.
say that like the Western writers don't, I mean, talk about love, but there's always things. Like I remember the first love story, Romeo and Juliet, like going back to like ninth grade, English, when you read Romeo and Juliet, like what was your like, kind of, again, a little bit off topic, what was your opinion about Romeo and Juliet and their
God.
so-called the epic love story that you always get told? Like they're always like these kind of like these standard for every love story. Like what was your opinion about them?
Right.
I want
I
to hear
think
yours.
if you don't think too much about it and just look at it as like, yeah, Romeo and Juliet, like that's what everybody, Leila Majnu, there's like a Romeo and Juliet in like every culture, every culture has names for them and are very familiar with them, and they're this kind of epic love story. But reading the actual story is like, this is the epic love story I'm talking about. I don't know, maybe I don't want to
Oh
be
no, I agree. Keep
maybe I'm
going.
not appreciative of the literature enough, but definitely if we're using like Urdu terminology in this case, not ishq for sure. Mohabbat, mohabbat, it's a bit far from mohabbat too. I don't know. I think it was more of a battle of
It was
their
almost
own.
rebellion if you think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
I
So
love I love that we actually can, right? Because that was my exact feeling in ninth grade, reading this in ninth grade. I was like, yeah,
yeah, like it's romantic to think about, like, oh my gosh, Romeo and Juliet, like just the
exactly,
phrase itself is
exactly.
like, wow, but like actually thinking about it is like, I don't
I
know.
think there's a play called The Elephant Man, and I forget his name. I know his first name is John, and he actually in that play, it's an interview that it was conducted with the Elephant Man, who, as our viewers might not know, was somebody who was almost critically deformed, back in the day, and finally he was put in a freak show. Finally, he was rescued during the 1920s, 30s, and he was put in a hospital, and they found out that he was slowly dying. And this reporter wanted to interview him, and he actually came, like, it was identified that he was very well versed and very intellectual, and he was speaking about Romeo and Juliet with that reporter who he actually had fallen in love with, according to the play, right? And she says to him, well, that was an epic love story, and he's like, well, how do you say that? And he's like, well, she's like, well, you disagree? And he says, yes, I disagree. Why? Because if I was Romeo, I would have made sure that she was, not that she was alive. When he says it in his, in his monologue, he says, "Oh my God, you're warm to the touch. I can feel your, I feel like you're still breathing." And yet he still takes the poison. And she's like, "Yeah, but what if they didn't die? They wouldn't have been a story." And he says, "If it was love, we wouldn't have needed a story."
Wow,
so
very, very true, very true.
so like I agree with that 101%. That, like, it was like when I read in ninth grade, I was like, he came to see the other girl, and then she was prettier, and then he was like, "Hey, hi, hey, what's up? How you doing?" Like, kind of like, so I agree 101%. But going back to your questioning, like, what's the next book about? Shall we expect from Kainat in the forefront? Or in the
So
future? I'm sorry, I'm losing my words
no,
officially.
no, no worries. So my next book, I actually just finished the manuscript last week and I'm in the editing phase right now. But it's very different from Journey to Hidayah. It's like a coming of age slice of life story about like a teenage girl. Her name is Hayat, and she's living this very charmed, carefree life, loving family, loving older brothers, zero responsibilities, and everything's just kind of falling into place. But then out of nowhere, like tragedy kind of strikes the family. Everything falls apart. Her family's shattered, and suddenly she has to step up and take care of everything and be the caretaker in her household. And she's struggling to cope, she's struggling to heal, and because I love romance, she reconnects with, as a form, as a way to try to heal, reconnects with her best friend's brother, who she's kind of had a crush on for ages, but then she's also drawn to her deceased brother's best friend, and for reasons she can't explain. So the story is kind of like her journey to like heal herself and her family. um, and it's kind of a story about how people deal with grief in different ways, and how grief can form like unexpected connections, and how sometimes the messiest moments and the messiest parts of our lives can lead to the deepest connections. So very different from Journey to Hidayah, but I'm very excited about it.
Kind of like what they I hear, trauma bonding almost, right? Like, but in a better way, because obviously your perspective on it is going to be a little bit more holistic. So in terms of your genre, like I see a common pattern. All your heroines are strong, and kind of independent young women. And kind of correlating to Miss Nusrat's question earlier, like, how do you think, what kind of pattern does that set for the people, not only that are your readers, but in general as a whole, as like how you are, because writers are influencers in much bigger sense than those that show up in dresses and makeup, right? Because they influence something much more essential, the thoughts, right? And the thoughts are what come into action. So how do you think, like, female led stories, how especially your female led stories, can change the conversations not only in our society but Western society as a whole, especially about the Muslim women leaders?
Right. So it's always, I'm always trying my best to write dynamic female characters and to make sure that strength and success has a very varied definition. So, in Journey to Hidayah, Zoya is this successful CEO. She's breaking glass ceilings, and that's one form of success. And then, in this current manuscript, Hayat is like she's the caretaker of her household. That's one form of success. So I like to make sure, especially with the female characters, that there's no strict definition of success, and that, or like, because we have, I think, in the Western perception, this cookie cutter definition of a successful woman, which is like, she's a working woman and she's juggling family and career and everything. And that's amazing, like, for people who can do that. But then we have this perception of scorning homemakers, housewives, people who may not be as conspicuously working hard. So for me, it's really important to always push this narrative that strength, success for women, Muslim Pakistani women, has many different definitions, and it really depends on each person.
Excellent. So, and I agree. There is the Western concept of, a successful woman being married to her job, so to speak, and that is now taking a shift, unfortunately, in the current political climate, where there's something called trad wives. I'm sure you've heard of that concept, where it's the
Mm,
complete opposite. Now, and it's actually, I hate to correlate and give it this name, but it's become sort of Eastern values, which are, a successful woman is, yes, she's educated, but she's also married to a successful man, which
mm,
again is not the right concept either. So yeah, and I love that in your books, not only are you showing a successful woman who is leading the way in her industry, but also she's in tune with her feelings, and also open to love and affection and romance, and a marriage, right? So that
mm,
is, it's a nice, for lack of a better word, marriage of concepts that are often separated from one another, you
mhm.
know so what do you write anything else, in terms of like, anything else, like, per se?
So I used to write poetry a lot. With the anthologies that I mentioned before that we co-published in high school. That was like I wrote poetry collections for it. I think I feel like I've either lost my touch with poetry or the desire to write it is not the same anymore. But just this morning, actually, I was rewatching one of my favorite Pakistani dramas, Parizad, and and I think that kind of got me into the poetry sphere again. So maybe I'll go back to exploring that. But I guess generally I write fiction.
Excellent. Okay. So that's awesome. I agree. Like one it does get set in a way. Like I'll tell you, even when I was writing as a young writer, I wrote a lot of stories, and I actually have it. I have to send you my notes. I actually have some of them still saved, and but then I got into this kind of trend of writing poetry, and then I was like, can I really write a lot like a short story anymore? So I get it, like you get into this you become comfortable in a matter of speaking, with the type of writing that you're doing. So on like let's just let the cat out of the bag. So actually Kainat is also taking on another venture with Women to Women. She is our new editor in chief of our Women to Women journal, and she's going to be helping us not only garner a collection that is more respective towards Generation Z, but also changing the conversation, so to speak, for not only the Generation Z, but also every generation beyond. Because we truly feel at Women to Women that we need on board young writers and young minds to keep the conversation going and keep our kind of our agenda and our goals current and relevant. So I thank you, Kainat. Welcome aboard. I'm so happy that you're here. And as the former editor in chief, I can tell you that Kainat precedes me in everything. So
I'm
inshallah, I
you're
know I
flattering.
can't wait. Inshallah, I can't wait for all you guys to like hear what she has to say, and especially like Kainat in terms of um a female who is now approaching or is in young adulthood. What do you think is something like a takeaway that you could give somebody who is growing up in these very trivial times where boundaries are blurred and values are abstract, to say the least? What would you say is kind of like an advice that you could give somebody of your age when approaching not only love and romance but life in general, and with the all the nuances that exist outside of our bubble per se?
I think so. Someone had once asked me this question before, specifically in regards to writing, and so I I think I would always say that like every writer writes with a different pen, right? Everyone has their own style, everyone has their own methods, but I think that applies to like other things in life as well. You Everyone has their own, I guess, thing and their own passion and their own pen, so to speak, right? So embrace that talent, but always, 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 I think, be humble and be willing to accept that there's always something new to learn. There's always room for improvement, but don't ever give up what you have in you. Like, don't ever embrace your talent and be humble, but don't ever let anyone, I guess, discourage you from embracing that.
Inshallah, inshallah, Aziz. And what do your friends obviously read your writing, and your friends obviously know about what you're up to now. What do they have to say about such things and such ventures?
So my friends, oh my gosh, my friends are the most supportive people ever after my family, alhamdulillah. Um, I think it's always important to, you are who your friends are. There's, I believe there's, if I'm not wrong, there's a hadith about it too, about surrounding yourself with the right companions. Um, My friends teach me a lot. I learn a lot from them. I'm lucky to have them, honestly, and they're always very supportive, very like always have my back. You know, I know I have that safety net. I have my family. I have my friends. So, alhamdulillah for that.
Mashallah, there is a hadith about that, and one of the I think the hadith that is one of my favorite hadiths is that to have somebody in your circle that is of a higher piety than you, so to speak. Obviously, only Allah Subhanahu wa Taala can judge that. But why is that? Because they say that if, for example, you end up in a higher level of Jannah than your friend, or your friend ends up in a higher level of Jannah than you, then they can actually ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, hey, I don't see so and so here. And then the angels can bring up that person. Subhanallah. Like
Mhm.
that is how important it is to be surrounded by good people. Subhanallah. So like I hope I didn't misquote. Please maaf kar dena agar maine kisi ko misquote kiya. Magar mashallah, yes, I agree 101%. And honestly, Kaina, to be only 22, I know that sounds so bad. I hate when people put only and you're like, like, but
Okay, I'm
yeah,
22 right now.
22, and to have this mindset and be not only confirmed in your deen, but also in your value system is, I'm so sorry, I think that was my work message, but like is very, very inspirational, honestly, especially again, being born and raised in the United States of America, which again, many things get a bad rap, and this is one of the things that get a bad rap. And to be open to a conversation about love and romance, and having that kind of value system in your family where people are having open conversations, and to hold on to deen as the number one priority is, mashallah. May we all be lucky to have such children. Mashallah, your parents have done an amazing job, and I can't wait to see, mashallah, mashallah, and I can't wait to see what else is in store from for us to see from you. And I look forward to seeing you just uh, go off into that trajectory. Honestly, like I just cannot wait, inshallah ta'ala.
Thank you so much. You definitely flatter me. I have a
It's
lot to improve, but thank you so much.
no worries. And inshallah, so we will sign off now. And going back to what Kainat was saying, be true to your voice, be true to you, and always keeping the right value system, and whatever that may be, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, but at least be true to you. We are
Mhm.
trying to in like get everybody in the conversation, no matter who it is, no matter their background, race, or creed. So but at the end of it all, what I think unites every human being is that moral compass. Oh my God, what's that accent? Moral compass. So, and that we all should be relative to that, no matter what we are doing in life, whether it's writing, whether it's approaching the corporate world, whether it's pursuing a dream to jump out of an airplane. I mean, I don't know about that, but anyways, so like be true to you, regardless. So with that, I'll be signing off. Thank you, Kainat,
Thank
so
you
for
so
joining
much.
us, and
Thanks.
thank you everybody else who joined as well, and thank you for everybody's compliments. Um, we love you. Keep it up. All right, take care, hon. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.